Mike Costello, and I'd like to talk to you in the next few minutes about finding the sacred. All of us are interested in connecting our lives with that which is divine, but often it seems difficult. We think that religion or spirituality are difficult areas to attain and more difficult to become proficient in. But in reality, we all have the ability to tap into that which is sacred. And that which is sacred is at the center of peace and prosperity and health and balance. And it has nothing to do with the church that we go to. It has nothing to do with our religion, but it has everything to do with how we feel about our relationship with that which is sacred and divine, what the relationship is between us and what we call God. In New Thought, we believe that there is a universal connectiveness. We believe that everyone and everything is created for good and is brought into this manifestation for a positive, affirming purpose. And so in that process, we believe that God is everywhere, that universal presence sustains us and blesses us and guides us and directs us. And we believe that the sacredness of life begins with the way that we think and translates into the quality of our actions and the words that we speak. And if we connect with the sacred reality of life, then everything that we do, everything that we think, and every action of our life can be sacred. And in fact, if we consecrate ourselves to the reality that we are all expressions of God and that God is in the midst of everywhere that we are, then we're able to reach out to this divine presence and to claim its reality in our daily lives. We say that we live in our minds and not in the world, and that means that we think. The thought processes of our life determine the quality of our life. So often in this program, we talk about centering and the necessity to bring ourselves to a peaceful, quiet place that unites us with the presence of God. But what we need to be able to do is to unite ourselves with that presence all of the time. We need to be able to do it while we're driving on the freeway, while we're on hold waiting for someone on the telephone, when we're listening to someone who's sharing some intimate or important detail about their life, when we're in the strife and conflict that we fall into from time to time, and even when we're in our most difficult times, when we're troubled and challenged with illness, with loneliness, with depression, or with lack of financial resources. In all of these experiences, what we want to do is to be able to tap into or connect with the sacred in life. And if we're going to do that, we have to have a view of life which is positive and affirmative. In order to do this, we need to be aware and cautious of the surroundings that we find ourselves in. We need to examine and we need to look aggressively at the groups in which we find ourselves. Most of us were born into a family unit of some kind, and we grew up in that unit. And then as we went out on our own, we created another family unit. That was a chosen family. And in the process, we had circles of friends in school and in clubs and at work and in different environments in which we found ourselves. But every time, in every group, in every circumstance and situation, with the exception of the very beginning of our family unit into which we were born, we had a choice. We had a choice of the group to which we have joined, the group to which we have affiliated ourselves, and the group of which we have become a part. And so often we find ourselves within a group that has a negative influence upon us, that doesn't view life in a sacred and positive and affirming way. And when we participate in those groups, unless we have a very strong consciousness and unless we have a very positive nature, we become a part of the vibration of that group. One of the things that we teach in New Thought is the reality that everything is energy. Thought is energy. And that these energies that are created emit vibrations. And what we talk about so often is their feelings. But in fact, it's not feelings that we're absorbing. It's not feelings that we're sensing. It's the vibration that we're sensing. If someone speaks to you sharply, if someone is critical of you, if someone is attacking you constantly, then you feel a negative vibration. You say that you feel that attack or you feel that hurt or that pain, but in fact you are feeling the energy that they are sending forth. And all of life is sending forth energy, and all of this energy is sending forth vibration. We believe that the sacredness of life creates a positive and affirming vibration, that it brings healing and balance and strength, and that that vibration of sacredness is constantly flowing into the universe, into life, into your life and my life, into the world, and into all that is and all that's experienced in the physical world. And if that's true, then this sacred energy and vibration is constantly showering down upon us. But in our unawareness, in our difficulty of understanding our own spirituality and understanding the dynamic power of mind and of thought and of spirit, we embrace negative thoughts or negative people or negative influences, and those cut us off from the sacred, from the harmonizing, from the balancing reality of life. We choose the people who surround us in most cases. In many cases, we don't. And so by conditioning our way of thought and by centering ourselves in the sacredness of life and seeing that sacredness despite the appearances of life, we are able to attune ourselves to a place of harmony and of balance and of perfect peace. To do that, we have to continually be aware of how it is that our mind is acting and reacting to the environment around us. And we have to know whether or not we are able to deflect those negative influences and whether we are strong enough to see the positive influences of life in everything. In our church, we sing a hymn, and the hymn is called, "I Behold the Christ in You." And what that hymn talks about is seeing Christ, the image, the idea, the process of Christ, the Christ consciousness, the Christed one, in everyone around us. And that is a challenge, but it also is a source of connecting with and seeing the sacred in life. It's no great accomplishment to see Christ or see God or see peace or see the sacred in a good and righteous and wonderful person. But it is a great challenge to be able to see that little spark of divinity within the people that we don't know, we don't understand, and who behave in ways that we cannot imagine or even comprehend. But if we begin to see even the worst person with a spark of divinity in their heart and mind, and if we begin to understand the reality that they behave, that they do, and they say the things that they say because of conditions that have come into their life, then we understand that all of us are wounded at different levels. All of us are damaged psychologically and spiritually by the effects of life. And only by connecting with the sacred, only by connecting with the power and grace of God, only by connecting with that universal reality of wholeness, can we center ourselves in perfect balance, in healing, and in health. If we're going to do that, we need to be willing to live life in a different way. We need to be willing to see the sacred in everything. So often in today's environment, we talk about seeing God in nature, and that's certainly a tremendous step forward in our ability to take God from being some external force that's way up in the sky to being a power and a grace and a dominion that's right here in the midst of our lives with us. But we need to go beyond simply seeing the flowers and the trees and the beauty as being sacred in the presence of God, but also see the sacred in every experience, in every person, and in the midst of every experience of life, and in every moment of our life. We need to strive to see that which is sacred, that which is positive. We believe in an unseen and a seen world. All spiritual believers believe in that concept to one degree or another, but in New Thought we believe that there is an unseen universe that's filled with spiritual reality. If you came from a traditional Christian background, you came to know about heaven and hell and angels, and we believe in New Thought that these are realities, but that these realities exist within the same dimension. That is, that spirit is everywhere, that God is everywhere, that angelic beings are everywhere, and that as we live this physical life, and as we deal with our circumstances and situations, that there is a sacred reality of unseen life that is going on constantly, supporting us, guiding us, and helping us. Finding the sacred is not difficult. Finding the sacred begins with going into our own heart, into our own mind, and seeing with the eyes of one that would see sacredness in every aspect of life, seeking it out and claiming it as a reality in our own being. The universe reaches out to you, the power of God reaches out to you, the sacredness of life reaches out to you, offering you peace, prosperity, happiness, balance, and absolute consciousness and awareness of the sacred unity of you with the power and grace of God. But it begins with your changing your way of thinking. It begins with your aligning yourself with that reality, claiming that to be true, and making it manifest in your life. And so as we share these ideas with you today, we're sharing ideas on bringing the sacredness of life into your physical experience to enrich you and make you a more dynamic, affirming, and positive person. We believe in prayer as a magnificent way of centering ourselves, and so we'd like to invite you to pause for a moment of reflection with us at this point in the program. Eternal and loving God, we gather our hearts and minds together in your divine presence, and we see that all of life is sacred, and that the sacredness of life is a gift from you. And even though we see conflict and difficulty, we see pain and suffering, we see limit and lack, in the midst of that, we have the ability to see beyond the physical appearances to the sacredness of your divine presence, undergirding and strengthening us always. We know these things in the name of faith, in the name of hope, in the name of love. Amen.
That is such a lovely thought, that God is all in all and is within each person, within everything.
I think that's one of the fundamental New Thought teachings. You know, when we go back to New Thought as Mary Baker Eddy and Nora Brooks and Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, the founders of our movement in the 1800s, they all believed in that issue of omnipresence. And we don't talk a lot about it, but the omnipresence, and even traditional Christians talk a lot about omnipotence and omniscience, but I think that these wonderful women who founded New Thought always talked about the omnipresence of God, and it was so much a part of what they taught.
Yes, and they brought God down to being a part of our lives in reality, in actuality, not just some figure in the far distant, away. Mm-hmm. And that makes a big difference. If we sense God's presence in our lives every moment, then we're going to act differently. We're not going to act from the element of fear. We're going to act from the element of love.
Mm-hmm. Isn't it interesting when we talk about New Thought? I just had this thought myself, yes. But how many of our philosophies and our teachings were articulated and begun by women?
Yes, it is. I hadn't thought of that.
Yes, almost all of the New Thought religions were founded by women.
Yes, that's true, except I suppose the Mormon Church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's not exactly New Thought.
No, but most metaphysical and New Thought churches are founded by women.
Well, I think that's because we're intuitive. Women are intuitive, and they function from that right brain. And men have been the leaders for ever so many years. And the Lord Christ brought through the new dispensation of love, ye one another, as I've loved you, the dispensation of love. And before that, 2,000 years prior to that, during the Aryan age of Aries, it was an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And then for the last 2,000 years now, it's been love. And that would come from the feminine aspect of being. And of course, we know, and everyone knows, that every person has both the feminine and negative aspect of being. And if we're not balanced, then we're not whole and happy as a rule. And that's why we come to Earth, to balance ourselves out and to be balanced. And so we have to be functioning from both aspects. So those women brought through that newer way of relating to God, because it was its time had come.
Its time had come to be shared with the universe, and they certainly did it in a wonderful way. But just the idea of the omnipresence of God sanctifies everything.
Yeah.
It sanctifies every aspect of life.
That's right, and this is holy ground. This studio is holy ground. Our homes are holy ground. Our church is holy ground. Everything is holy ground, because God is everywhere. He's all in all, and God is in every person. And I think when we look at people and see the Christ within, and you said that very well, then we empower them. And that's a gift we can give to others of empowerment, because we know that Christ is within everyone. If we see the Christ within them, then we're validating them.
And as we validate that, we add strength to that vibration that I
Yeah.
spoke about. And then the vibration compounds and it continues to emit and send forth that feeling of love and light and sacredness.
Exactly. And it also strengthens and magnifies our own energy, because that which we give out certainly comes back to us tenfold. And so it makes life far more beautiful. And I think that's happening. There's so much doom and gloom, and the news is always stressing the negative. And certainly there's negative aspect to life. We wouldn't have to be here if there wasn't. We're here for balancing. So if we can just stay attuned to the positive aspect of whatever's happening in a negative way, and know that it has to be for a reason and good can come of it, then we are more functioning from the God self within us, which is always there. We have to just function from that aspect of being.
And that's always a challenge
Yes.
to be able to do that. But I think people do often view life in a negative way. And I think because we hear the news or because we listen to preachers or we listen to our spouse or a number of reasons that people begin to dwell upon the negative aspects. And then I think they begin to believe, and I think we get some of this from religion, unfortunately,
Mhm.
and from traditional teaching, that this is really an evil place.
Yeah.
And that this power of evil is so dominant. And of course, we know there are negative influences, and that's a normal process, that there is the positive and the negative, and that balances. But the truth is that whenever we claim the presence of God, the negative aspects, or the dark influences of life, or the devil, or whatever
Yeah.
we choose to call it, never has authority over that power.
Exactly. And if we know the light is always stronger than the darkness, then we are helping to put that light out into the world. There was a young girl I met who was clairvoyant. She was only 9 years old, and she was telling me that a male entity tried to come into her energy. And I said, you know, that the light of God is always stronger than anything else. And you just have to say, be gone in the name of God, or be gone in the name of Jesus. And she said, I know that. So I said, how do you know? And she says, well, I say that. I call on my angel, and she comes every time. And so I said, what does she do? And she says, she throws a cross at that person, the person who's trying to come in, and the cross disappears in him, and then he disappears in the light. And this is a 9-year-old child speaking, so obviously she's speaking truth. And that's such an eloquent way of describing what happens when we send out positive thought forms.
Absolutely. And the ability that we have to dispel the negativity of life.
Totally. We have that ability, and we just have to call on it and know that we have it. And as we know in our hearts that we're attuned to God the whole, we are attuned. As we know in our hearts that Christ is within us, it's there.
And if we go back to Scripture, and of course we don't use Scripture for dogma and creed, but if we go back and look at the Garden of Eden story in the book of
Yeah.
Genesis, when we find that, and of course we're talking about symbolism, we're not talking about a real Adam and Eve from our perspective, but the symbolism teaches us that God instructed the first beings in how to believe and how to think and how to live, and invited them to live in perfect peace and balance and abundance. But it was the tree of knowledge that they were not to eat of. And so, as they ate of that tree of knowledge, their way of thinking separated them from the power of God. God
Yeah.
never changed.
Exactly.
And so, God's relationship with us has never changed from the foundation of the earth. Our feeling about it has changed because the way we think about it has changed, and we have become guilty. And of course, we've built theology around original sin and a variety of other things. But in truth, human mind has separated humankind from God. God has never separated himself or itself from us.
That is such an important point, and it covers everything, because in actuality, God is always there for us all the time. In our own reality, He might not be, because we have control of our own reality. Actuality is what it is, but the reality is what we place out as truth. And so, if our reality is that God is always with us, God always protects us, we never need to be afraid, then we don't live in fear. If we don't live in fear, then we live joyously, happily, and fulfilled.
And what do we say about fear so often?
Yeah.
False evidence appearing real, false evidence appearing real.
Yeah.
We see things that aren't true, and we believe them to be true, and they create fear for us, and then it paralyzes us.
Exactly. And then we just have to stop. But instead of flowing, and to flow, just to keep flowing. That's the secret. And we're all going to have troubles in our lives. We're all going to be ill. We're all going to have problems. We're all going to have relatives who get sick and die. And we know that we have adversity facing us in life, but we don't have to fear that. We know that it's a natural course of events. Again, we wouldn't be here on earth if we were not here to work through the things we are working through, each in their own way. And so we can have compassion on others and send them love and light, and it makes a difference. It makes a difference when we do, because our prayers or our positive thoughts go out as light, and it lifts and lightens the space around the person to whom we send that. And then if we're sending negative thoughts, then it's like a constriction, like a boa constrictor. It just constricts the energies around that person. And we talk a lot about energy and vibration, but everything is energy and vibration.
And that all creates the environment that we experience and that others experience. And I think so often we need to remind ourselves that we are influencing other people through our vibration.
We are, just by our mood. And you've seen a person enter a room in a gloomy way with their faces down, and the energy just drops in the room. And you see someone enter happy and buoyant, and the energy lifts. It's manifest right there so easily and quickly. And that's true as we watch TV. Our energies drop when we watch whatever is being negative presented. And then our energies lift, if God grant, we're able to see things that are happy and joyous. And so this is why we need to just limit it if that's the case. And we need to pull ourselves away from situations. If we know a certain pattern manifests, then don't allow that pattern to manifest. Keep ourselves away from certain situations that would be in that way, if that's indeed what we know is a pattern. And we can encourage others to live in a higher way, but we can't live life for anyone else. Everyone has their own cross. Everyone has their own death, their own resurrection. And so they couldn't have the resurrection if they didn't have the death.
And we're all here, after all, in life, in this physical plane, to learn the lessons that we need to. So often we talk about the fact that life, our daily life, is a school for the soul. And so we have lessons to learn. But I think that the point that you made is so important about the influence of the things that we subject ourselves to. And when we think about young people or people of any age today that subject themselves to literature and to media and to movies that have such horrific impacts, I think we need to be cautious of the psychic damage that's being done.
Exactly. And rock music is so detrimental to the emotional body. And if we just could see what happens when that rock music is being played and the discordancy that it creates within our own physical being, because all our other bodies affect our physical bodies, then we wouldn't tolerate it for very long.
Or limit it.
Yes.
Yeah, limit it,
Yes.
because it is that balance and the necessity of having harmonic balance that's important. And also the kinds of things that entertain us. I think so often, and there is a level of entertainment that comes from seeing a horror picture or being frightened, but that's quite different from creating a fixation on murder or on violence. And so I think that as we're entertained and as we read and as we watch, we need to really be aware of what it is we're absorbing and the impact that it's having upon us, and whether our vibration, that what we're getting from it, is overtly negative or whether it's passive. And if it's passive, then it can be entertainment. It isn't a judgmental issue. So
exactly, you're so right there that we need to study our lives and see what part is creating negativity for us, and then cut that out or cut it back, because we are responsible for our own lives, for our own moods, and the energies we send out into the world. And actually, I think the consciousness of mankind has raised very greatly, exponentially, so that the consciousness of mankind is higher, not lower, in spite of all the doom and gloom we hear and see. People are functioning from a higher level of consciousness today than ever before.
Oh, and we absolutely, in New Thought, believe that this is the best of all times, and that all of life is ebbing in unceasing progression toward unity with God. And even though people tell us that this world is getting worse and worse, we know that that's not true. And we know that the quality of life in the world is getting better and better.
Exactly.
For the physical world and also for the emotional and for the spiritual world. And one of the wonderful things that's happening in the spiritual world today is the issue of acceptance and
Yes.
tolerance. And so many of the walls are coming down between the denominations and the faith traditions. And we're coming to understand more clearly the importance and the value and the purity and the beauty of other religious traditions, as we have Muslims and we have Hindus and we have other Eastern faiths coming to our Western faith, and we're uniting, and we're seeing such a resurgence of meditation, of prayer, of just wonderful things happening.
That
Yeah.
is so exciting. And also, we're not allowing churches to rule by fear anymore. If they rule by fear, people leave. Where before, people just stayed in that church modality and then stayed fearful. So now the churches are not getting by with what they used to in ruling people's lives in a negative way.
And of course, the churches are responsible for claiming the sacredness of life as well.
Yes.
And yet we know that many churches have had great difficulty. And of course, we don't want to be bashing churches because
No.
we have a church and we believe in them. But we do need to be aware of the fact that if we're in a negative religious environment or spiritual environment, it isn't necessary sometimes to change our religion, but it is necessary to change the way that we think about
That's
our
right.
process.
That's right. And if we assert ourselves within that church framework, if that's the one we like, then they will change because that's what's been changing. And that's the whole point that churches are changing now because they know they have to. They can't rule by fear like they did for ever so long.
Mhm.
And it's so important that people take back their own power and know they have control over their lives and take that control and use it and feel the spirituality within their own beinghood and know that religion and spirituality are not necessarily synonymous and it's a spiritual aspect of their own being from which they must function.
Absolutely. And take back your power is the topic of your Wednesday evening church services.
Yes.
And so, as we close this program, Reverend Freelander and I would like to express our appreciation for your listening, and we hope that you found the information that we've shared with you useful. We look forward to seeing you next time.
Rights every wrong, dynamic power helps me be strong, confident living comforts my heart. From such a blessing I can't depart. Confident living helps me expand visions of value, the kingdom at hand. Confident living, talent to win, gift of the Spirit moves from within. Confident